This is Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
I'm the only lawyer ever to obtain a court ruling that a president of the United States committed a crime.
For truth, for competition.
As a young lawyer, I helped break up AT&T. That's why you have all your cell phones today.
For sovereignty, for the Republic.
I'm the guy who at Judicial Watch, which I founded, uncovered the Chinagate scandal. Millions of dollars going to the Clinton campaign, corrupting our political system.
For the privacy of citizens.
And I'm the only guy to have enjoined the National Security Agency from mass surveillance on hundreds of millions of Americans.
Tearing it up.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
Bringing it back.
We're going to take this country apart and put it back together again in the way envisioned by our founding fathers.
It's not just talk.
We're not just regurgitating news stories. Larry Klayman, special prosecutor, is making the news.
And now, here's Larry.
Welcome to this week's edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman, another very important show. Of course, I don't do what Sean Hannity does and promise things that aren't going to happen. So let's talk about what's going to happen, okay? Number one, it's clear that the president will survive the impeachment conviction in the U.S. Senate. Just last week, late last week, Senator Lamar Alexander came out against, he's a rhino, he's an establishment Republican, against more witnesses. So it would appear that by the time things happen, I don't know when it's going to happen, but the president will be acquitted in the Senate of this impeachment. Now, that's one thing. But what this really tells you is that the Republicans are good at playing defense, but they're not good at playing offense. I'm talking about the Republican establishment. They did succeed in throwing a monkey wrench into the vile Adam Schiff, Gerald Nadler, Schumer, Chucky Schumer, as we call him, and a whole lot of them, Nancy Pelosi, okay? But, you know, it's not just a question of checkmating the other side. It's a question of bringing about justice. It's a question of moving this country forward to an equal system of justice, to constitutional law, to the rule of law. And look at what Trump did to get himself into trouble with Ukraine, okay? It wasn't impeachable. It wasn't a crime. But he tried to take matters into his own hands with the president of Ukraine and press him to do an investigation of the corrupt Joe Biden and his half-wit corrupt son, Hunter Biden. President is head of the executive branch. He's technically head of the Justice Department. He is entitled to do that. There's nothing criminal about it. There's nothing impeachable about it. He had an obligation to call for an investigation of Joe Biden, particularly since, God forbid, Joe Biden may be the next president of the United States, assuming he survives, because he's so senile and fragile right now. I don't even think he'll make it through the primary season before he collapses and croaks. I mean, I don't wish him any harm, but I mean, the guy's barely there. He can barely walk. He can barely speak. All he can do is give you his Cheshire grin. That's it. Nothing. It's only because the Democrats think he might win because he stands for nothing that he got the major support, at least up to now. But look who's coming behind him. Right now, the polls, as of today, show that Bernie Sanders is actually beating Joe Biden. Now, this is frightening. Bernie Sanders is a communist. He's not a socialist. He's a communist. He took his honeymoon in Moscow. He's a self-hating Jew. I mean, a tremendous amount of anti-Semitism in the former Soviet Union and even in Russia. His father hid his name, changed his name from a Jewish name to Sanders. He's supported by radical Muslims in the U.S. Congress, in the House of Representatives, Ilham Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and of course Linda Sarsour, that vehement anti-Semite who supports Hamas and Hezbollah and wants Israel destroyed. Of course, so does Tlaib and Omar. But the risks are great, and what we have are Republicans playing defense, not offense. There will be no justice with regard to Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. They'll run away from that. First of all, Joe Biden's one of their colleagues in the Senate. Senator Lindsey Graham could have called Hunter Biden and Joe Biden in at the Judiciary Committee for testimony months ago. We wouldn't even have had an impeachment trial because Democrats would have run for the exit, stage left, so to speak, not like Snagglepuss, but by the dishonest hacks that they are. But we've also got a situation where our Attorney General, Bill Barr, is not much better, if at all, than Jeff Sessions, who's a complete disgrace. He left in disgrace. Now he's running for the U.S. Senate against my client and friend, Roy Moore in Alabama. He has no chance down there. I mean, people in Alabama actually stand for something. You know, they get smeared as racist. They're not racist in Alabama. The South is less racist than the North, believe me. Go down there, see the interaction of the people. Let's see what happened, you know, after the Civil War and in modern times, how the South is integrated, how it respects, generally speaking, each race. The North is the one where African Americans still live in ghettos, where you know they're subject to violence, you know, black on black crime, and no one does anything about it in the black community. But that aside, is that this Attorney General, Bill Barr, is a complete fraud. He's passed on the prosecution of James Comey, former FBI director, even when an Obama-appointed Inspector General made criminal referrals on 2 occasions. Michael Horowitz also made criminal referrals with regard to the deputy FBI director, Andrew McCabe. Nothing. John Brennan, James Clapper, who used mass surveillance, not just on Trump, but on all of the American people. Obama appointees, Obama intelligence czars, nothing. No indictments, not even really an investigation. Passing on Hillary Clinton's misuse of the Clinton Foundation, which is a racketeering enterprise, which I sued years ago, but the case wound up in front of an Obama appointee, or Clinton appointee rather, and that went by the wayside. And what about Obama himself that orchestrated all of this illegality? It's unbelievable. Our Attorney General sits there protecting himself, not the American people, because you know what? In Washington, D.C., because of this mass surveillance, they have dirt on everyone. So what you can expect is that the President of the United States will ultimately be acquitted of impeachment, but then everything's going to go back to where it was. No justice, no equal justice, a disrespect for the Constitution and the rule of law, a tacit agreement between the political parties that they won't hurt each other too much. They can continue to stuff money into their own pockets, amass power. The American people be damned. As Louis XV said, après moi le déluge, with his wife Marie Antoinette, both beheaded ultimately in the French Revolution. You know, that's what it is. American people be damned. We're not much different than pre-revolutionary France was leading up to the revolution in France in 1789. And we're not any different from the situation in the colonies that led to our revolution in 1776. And that is why Freedom Watch is so important. You know, I keep harping upon this. You know, if not Freedom Watch, then what? We are the People's Justice Department. We are bringing hard-hitting lawsuits. We're not like my former group that I founded. We just don't get documents and go on Fox News and crow about it and pound our chest how great we are. You know, I don't know how great I am or I'm not great. What I want to see are results. So I bring hard-hitting cases. Our citizens' grand juries, which are cranking up, you know, shortly, will be seeking the indictment of James Comey, of Andrew McCabe, of John Brennan, of James Clapper, of Hillary Clinton and others with regard to the Clinton Foundation, Bill Clinton, Chelsea Clinton, the Obamas, all of them. They need to be held accountable. They will be indicted. They will be tried. They will be convicted. They will be sentenced, and will seek to mete out the sentences peacefully and legally. Hopefully the president, if he's reelected, will enforce those sentences himself, because we have a right for citizens' justice. We have no justice in our government. It's injustice. It's no longer the Department of Justice that I was proud of when I began there as a trial lawyer in the Antitrust Division in 1979. It's the Department of Injustice. I want you to get my book. You can still find it at Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com, Horrors, Why and How I Came to Fight the Establishment. As I've said, I'm writing a new book. It's copywritten. It Takes a Revolution. Forget the scandal industry. That's the subtitle. Forget Hannity. Forget the rest of them. They're two-faced. They're interested in building their viewer base, advertising dollars, self-aggrandizement. Every day, major breaking development on Hannity. There's going to be justice just around the corner. You got Sarah Carter. You got Greg Jarrett. You got the whole lot of them. They're pumping Fox News. While at the same time, during the day, you have the owner of Fox News, who's now Lachlan Murdoch, an ultra-leftist. His brother James is even more of a leftist. Ironically, they're the ones that tapped, at least James, the royal family in Britain years ago. The only reason they weren't indicted is because they paid off the British government not to indict them. You know, but the fact is, is that Fox is two-faced. You don't have a real conservative network anymore that has a great reach. You've got Chris Wallace, that vile leftist, son of Chris Wallace. At least Chris Wallace, when he worked for 60 Minutes, as the major host, at least he was smart. At least he uncovered things. Chris Wallace is a dolt. He's an idiot. Then you've got Andrew Napolitano, an even bigger idiot, who's been trying to undercut the president of the United States. You've got Juan Williams, who they put on there. Juan years ago was a conservative. Actually, he was removed from the Washington Post over a sexual harassment complaint, but he doesn't talk about that. I'm not saying he was guilty, but he was thrown off Washington Post. He just plays the game. They got to have some dumb liberal on there. So I remember Roger Ailes telling me that if I'm going to have some GD liberal on Fox News, I'm going to get the dumbest F I can find. So what do they have? They have Juan Williams. It's a joke. It's embarrassing. Arthel Neville, another one. A whole lot of them. So I want you to find the networks of the Sinclair Network. They are truly conservative. They don't claim they're conservative, but they allow conservatives to speak clearly. And I've been on that show. Eric Bolling, who left Fox News, they got rid of him, found bogus excuses to get rid of him. He now does a show, and I'm frequently on that show. I'm inserted in there, and I hope someday I'll have my own show on there. But forget about Newsmax, too. Newsmax, you can't even look at its picture. It's so bad. But notwithstanding that, Chris Ruddy's two-faced as well. It's the same thing. Plays both sides of the street, pretends that he's the friend, that Chris Ruddy's the owner of Donald Trump, but at the same time undercuts him. I used to write a blog there, Clayman's Court. I can't even get the blog published without it being censored. It's unbelievable. So I want you to look to Sinclair in the future and see what's really important is this radio show and our daily podcast for 10 minutes. You can find it at freedomwatchusa.org. You can find it at Spotify, iTunes, others. Please get this out to the American people. I'll be right back.
Dangerous.
You don't hear, use the court and the law.
Lethal.
This is bad.
Special prosecutor.
Very bad.
Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
What I'm saying is this. The President of the United States will survive impeachment and conviction. But there are forces on the left, obviously, that still want to destroy him. And there are two-faced forces on the right, such as what you'll find at Fox News, whether it's Chris Wallace, Andrew Napolitano, and the others I mentioned, who will try to stab him in the back, just as Caesar was stabbed in the back by the Roman Senate. The Republican establishment still wants Trump either out or neutered so they can continue to stuff money and power into their pockets and into their resumes. And that's the moral to the story. And that's why this show is so important to get it out. I want to say it again because education is what united the colonies. It's what caused us to be able to form a free nation, a free republic. And you can find this show at freedomwatchusa.org. You can find it on Facebook. You can find it on Spotify. You can find it on iTunes. You can find it on Patreon. Is that we need to educate, because that is why what I do at Radio America is so important, because they let me say what I think. And that's what I love about this president. He says what he thinks. He's not pulling punches like George W. Bush or H.W. Bush or others on the so-called right, which they weren't really on the right. They try to play the game. They think they're holier than now. Now is not the time to be holier than now. Now is the time to speak truth to power. Not the way the Democrats do it, but the way we have to do it. But on the phone right now are two of my great friends, heroes, and clients. One of them is DEMETRICK PENNIE. He's an African-American policeman, a sergeant in Dallas, Texas. He experienced the Dallas massacre. He was right in the middle of it. He was assaulted. His brothers were killed. And he stood up fearlessly for the rights, equal rights of the American people. He is a disciple of Martin Luther King, who was a great man. He's someone who believes that justice is for everybody. I did a tribute to Martin Luther King on his birthday, and he had a great quote, is that, if you don't have justice, for one person, you don't have it for anybody. I'm paraphrasing, and that's true. So DEMETRICK and I got together, my brother, and we filed lawsuits against Louis Farrakhan. It was his disciple that committed that massacre in Dallas. Louis Farrakhan, a radical black Muslim, Jew and Christian hater, anti-Semite, anti-cop hater. My brother was a cop in Philadelphia, so I know all about the police. I represent some Philadelphia policemen, as a matter of fact, but that's another show at another time. But law enforcement is extremely important because they protect us. So DEMETRICK stood up for his brothers, and he stood up for the American people at great expense and risk to himself. And we sued Farrakhan, Black Lives Matter, New Black Panthers Party, the whole lot of them, Sharpton, Jackson, everybody. The case was assigned to an African-American judge, Sam Lindsay, who bailed out. He was so frightened. Maybe he thought, he'd be killed. Who knows? But still, DEMETRICK did that. He was called every conceivable name, not just by radical leftists who were white, but by radical blacks who called him Uncle Tom, House N. His life was threatened. This is a truly brave man. He's now running for Congress in the Dallas area. I personally endorse him and support him. We need people like that in our country. And then also on the phone is Joel Gilbert, a great Hollywood conservative producer, filmmaker, also a friend of DEMETRICK. At this point, I introduced the two of them. And Joel was the one who uncovered the Trayvon hoax. And what happens when Joel uncovers the Trayvon hoax? Well, he's called a racist and, of course, attacked by the left. And we're going to talk about that in the next segment as to what he uncovered. But I also want to talk about brave people, brave African Americans, not just DEMETRICK, but people like Kobe Bryant, who just died, and Patrick Mahomes, who's playing in the Super Bowl this weekend, the quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs. You have to really admire these people because they're going up against the grain and they're speaking truth to power and truth to threats. So when I come back, we're going to talk about all of that and what all this means and why we have to repair race relations in this country. And the only way we can do that is to bring about justice. And that's what we're all seeking to do. We are all equal. I'm, in effect, a civil rights lawyer. I represent not just DEMETRICK. I represented the people that were hit with anthrax at the post office and others. I've represented Muslims even. So this is something that people need to understand. I'm going to be right back with DEMETRICK PENNIE and Joel Gilbert, two great American patriots. Hold on. You're in for an interesting ride.
And now, 4 words that make corrupt politicians make wee-wee in their little pants.
Transparency and the rule of law will be the touchstones of this presidency.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
Be the one who makes our country great again. Go to freedomwatchusa.org and donate.
Introducing DEMETRICK PENNIE, a police officer from Dallas, Texas, Dallas PD, running for Congress in the Dallas area. DEMETRICK, tell us about your experience with what we talked about with regard to the massacre, why you stood up for equal justice to hold the guilty accountable that killed your brothers, and why you're running for Congress now and what you hope to accomplish. And then we're going to get to Joel and what has been going on with regard to George Zimmerman, the Trayvon hoax, and we'll talk about Kobe and Patrick Mahomes and other people who are also brave that we need to stand up for and admire and support in this country.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me on, Larry. I really appreciate it. You are my brother, and I tell everybody that we don't look alike, but we sure think alike.
Well, I think we look a lot like we're humans. At least we're not space aliens, so we look alike.
That's right. Well, hey, listen. This is the thing. I think that I'm very appreciative of you getting behind me. When this whole deal happened back in 2016. But you got to remember that, as being an African American, that really understood what was happening to the African American community as a whole before we even got there. You got to remember this. This whole thing started in 2015. Well, really, I'd say 2014 was when it first emerged, but 2015 really took off after the Michael Brown incident, and you had these radical leftist attorneys and the media showing this nefarious message in the black community that inflamed everybody. And basically what it was trying to do was, it was agenda-driven that was causing everyone to hate police. And I knew that agenda was coming to Dallas. And what I wanted to do was stop it before it got here. But unfortunately, because of all the networks that were working, you had the leftist media working against law enforcement as a whole. You had social media working against us. That was allowing these groups to recruit, radicalize, and organize faster than anything that law enforcement had ever seen before. And by the time it got to Dallas, we were unable to sustain the network that had been built. And unfortunately, we lost 5 officers in that brutal attack. So, look, I knew exactly what was happening of what I had been studying for several years, and being someone who's wise enough to read and not pay attention to the nefarious ideas that are just percolating through the media. Oftentimes, you know that you're going to face attacks yourself, and I knew it. And when we first talked about how I wanted to address this issue after officers got killed in Dallas, you explained to me. You told me that it was going to be difficult. I was going to be standing on the island by myself. And I didn't realize the magnitude of standing on the island by myself. But I tell you what, it was all worth it looking back at it now. Because I knew that had I not stood up and said and called out those Louis Farrakhan and Al Sharpton, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and all those other so-called politicians that were using that narrative to marginalize people of color and have people in the streets tearing up their own communities. If I had not stood up and told people that this was wrong and this was not something that this is not the way we handle business in the black and minority communities. This is not how we want to stand up and fight for what's right. We want to use the courts to say when something is right and when something is wrong. And taking that message, that allowed us to quell that movement as it stood. So I'm very appreciative of you getting behind me in doing that. I figured that was something that we had to do. Otherwise, we would have lost a lot more police officers across this country.
And I appreciate that. And that is a segue to Kobe Bryant. We all mourn his death. He was a very bright guy. He actually went to my high school, of course, many years after I did, in Lower Merion, Philadelphia. That's the main line. He spoke Italian. He was extremely bright, one of the greatest basketball players of all time, and I think in the top 5 at least, maybe higher than that, even better than Magic Johnson of the Los Angeles Lakers, which, of course, is the premier basketball franchise, of history. But I remember when this George Zimmerman thing broke out, and Joel's going to talk about that next, when he was accused falsely of murdering Trayvon Martin. Sure, he killed him in self-defense. He had to, or he would have been killed. They went to Kobe Bryant. They said, we want you to condemn. This is the left, the Obama people, the Sharpton people, the Jackson people, the rest of them. We want you to condemn George Zimmerman. And he said, I'm not going to do that. You're coming to me because I'm black. I don't make my decision because I'm black. I'm an independent person. I'm an independent thinker. I myself was falsely accused of raping a woman in Colorado. I know what it's all about. Let justice play out. And sure enough, George Zimmerman was acquitted. Same thing with regard to Patrick Mahomes now, the greatest quarterback in the NFL. Nobody disputes that. Smart guy, just like Kobe. He's playing the Super Bowl on Sunday when this show is aired. And this is a guy who said, I'm not going to condemn George Zimmerman. I'm also my own person. And the guy was acquitted. Why are you still beating up on him? Why are you still saying that he murdered Trayvon Martin in cold blood, a little kid? The pictures that the left showed, that this radical black movement showed of George Zimmerman, of Trayvon Martin, was when he was a little kid, like about 12 years old. This guy was a big guy. He was a big dude. He was beating the crap out of George Zimmerman. George Zimmerman had no choice. Either it was his life or it was Trayvon's life, and he didn't even mean to kill Trayvon. But that's the point. And there are these brave people like you out there, and you need to be supported. You know, I don't even know that Kobe or Patrick Mahomes were conservative. They weren't conservative. They were and are people who just simply believe in justice, who will stand up, who aren't going to be rolled. And that's what we need in this country. Now, that's the segue to Joel Gilbert. Joel's been on the show a few times. He has worked with me with regard to the lawsuit I brought by George Zimmerman against not just Benjamin Crump, the lawyer of the Trayvon Martin family, who wrote a book, White Genocide Against Colored People, and George Zimmerman, of course, is prominently featured as defamatory. By the way, we talked about Fox News. Who is it that published this defamatory book? The Murdoch family. They own HarperCollins. They've been sued. Okay, this tells you something about the people behind Fox News. Greedy, people who have no principles. They believe in making money. And it's always been marketing at Fox News, but they're also now undercutting the president. And we've sued not just HarperCollins, but Crump himself. We've sued members of the family who participated in a conspiracy to present a false witness who did not have firsthand knowledge of what Trayvon was saying right before he died. They tried to convict Zimmerman. If he had been convicted, he would have gotten life imprisonment. And if they had charged him with murder one, he would have gotten the electric chair with old Sparky in Florida. And that could have happened too. And the prosecution, the state of Florida, rolled because the pressure got too hot in the kitchen. And initially, George Zimmerman was not arrested. The preliminary determination is it was self-defense. But with all this push by these radical black vigilantes and others in the white community as well, the ultra-left, they wound up indicting Zimmerman. He went through hell. He was acquitted. Still, he's threatened today. Someone tried to kill him. That person has gotten 20 years in prison. But he's at risk. He can't even show his face in public. He's been destroyed. So, Joel, I want to reintroduce you to our audience. Just give us a brief synopsis of what you uncovered in the Trayvon hoax, where they can find your book, and also the video of it, the documentary. But move on quickly from that, because people know the story here. And I want you to comment, along with DEMETRICK, on these really brave people like Kobe Bryant and Patrick Mahomes, who are, frankly, diamonds in the rough. And this is what we need in this country. People that talk clearly, that stand for things, that stand for true American values, equal justice under the law, and are trying to repair race relations rather than trying to destroy it. Joel, let her rip.
Okay, Larry, well said. Great to be back. Thanks for having me back. Hi to DEMETRICK out there in Texas. Look, the Trayvon hoax, Unmasking the Witness Fraud That Divided America, my film, which you can see the trailer. I tell everybody, get started with the trailer. It's also a book. Go to the TrayvonHoax.com. And the Trayvon hoax is two things. It's the substitution of a legitimate phone witness, a girl that was on the phone with Trayvon Martin, that heard what he was up to, what he was thinking, and why he attacked George Zimmerman. She would not testify. Her name was Brittany Diamond Eugene, and she refused to incriminate Zimmerman, so she was substituted out for a fake witness, an imposter who knew nothing, named Rachel Gentile, and that was the key witness. Without her, there would have been no arrest, no trial. So I go through the entire fraud and show who knew about it, which includes Trayvon's mother, Sabrina Fulton, by the way. I proved that. She's now running for Miami-Dade commissioner. And everybody just kind of went on board. They're still on board with this narrative. And you mentioned how Kobe Bryant, actually at the time, I've actually got his quote. He said, I'm not going to react to something just because I'm African-American. If we progress as a society, you don't jump to someone's defense just because they're African-American. You sit and listen to the facts. So this is a totally normal person. And what happened to him after that, Janine Hill from ESPN and others started hammering him and telling him he's got to get with the program. And sure enough, within a few months, he tweeted out things like, I support the Trayvon Martin family, and then he went to a Trayvon Martin rally with the parents. So it's
I'll tell you something, Joe. Let me interrupt you there. You still have to give Kobe a lot of credit because he stuck his neck out. People know what he really meant, okay? And same thing for Patrick Mahomes. Patrick said the same thing in effect. And now he's being vilified on tweets and social media, and he's now the quarterback. Probably will win the Super Bowl. On Sunday when the show airs. So
we give Kobe
these
a lot
people
of
need to be
credit.
supported. They need to be supported, and I don't want to undercut what Kobe said. Okay, because he said what he said first is what he meant.
Correct. But it's a phenomenon. Maybe Dimitri can speak about that within the black community, they kind of all jump on you to conform. Now, Kobe didn't actually come out as a Black Lives Matter or anything. He just tried to show a little bit of conformity. But he stuck with what he said. Patrick Mahomes, all he said when he was 17 years old, he sent out a tweet that said, this is a horrible tragedy, but there was no criminal activity that occurred. Now, they've been beating him up on social media for a couple of weeks now for that, back when he was 17 years old, and he has not folded or responded at all. But this is part of what I call the Trayvon hoax, the idea that they put out there for black Americans that there's armed white men in the streets, especially cops, that are eager to shoot unarmed black people for no other reason than their skin tone. This is what they put out there. And they also say that America is hopelessly racist. The government is racist. So if you're black, you have to believe in this narrative, and you have to go out and vote for your protectors in the Democrat Party. That's the Trayvon hoax. And I'm finding a lot of response to my film and book, especially from black people that are saying, wow, we got played. I had an email from a girl, very typical. She said, I grew up on the Trayvon Martin stuff, and I have a black son, and I was afraid for him to grow up in America. But now I realize we got played. Thank you. So there's an awakening going on, I think, where people realize that this entire narrative is nonsense. And when the celebrities like Kobe or Mahomes come out and tell the truth, it's the biggest threat, not really to black people, but to the white liberals that love this narrative, because this narrative is how they control the black voters. That's their hold over them, and they always get outraged.
Yeah, look what they've done to Conway West. Same thing, supporting Trump. I'll tell you something. If Martin Luther King was alive, okay, he would be supporting DEMETRICK. He'd be supporting you. He'd be supporting George Zimmerman at this point in time. There's no doubt about it. But we're going to come back. I'm going to hold you guys over to the third segment because this is really important, the verdict section. Because the verdict here is that we really have to repair race relations, is that we need people, too, in this country who will stand up, who will do the right thing, who don't try to play both sides of the street like you see, on Fox News and other places, and the Republican rhinos, who can only play defense. They can't play offense to protect their own interests in Washington, D.C. So we're going to be back with that. Until such time as we're back, go to freedomwatchusa.org, join our Justice League, and contribute to our cause. The verdict section of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman awaits you.
Before he was a trial lawyer, he sliced him and diced him.
People used to ask me, Larry, what caused you to start Judicial Watch and now Freedom Watch, given the powerful forces in this country that put you at risk?
In a meat packing plant.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
A very special prosecutor, Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
Now the verdict, fellow patriots, friends, supporters. I'm going to turn to DEMETRICK right now because he's actually running for Congress, you see. You don't need these clowns that are in Congress now. Everybody in Congress, nearly everybody, the good ones are leaving, like Mark Meadows from North Carolina. And the ones that are there have been neutered to the point that they're a neutered elephant on the Republican so-called right. But DEMETRICK wants to be a congressman. So, DEMETRICK, we only have about 5 minutes in this segment, but take a couple minutes and explain why you want to be a congressman.
Yeah, so essentially, so I am running for Congress, and I'm running under my nickname is Trey Pennie. So Dr. Trey Pennie is how you will see me labeled on most of my endorsements. But essentially, I'm running for Congress down in Texas District 30 against a 26-year incumbent that's been basically in office since 1993. And this is the district with the highest murder rate in the state of Texas. This district has a lot of the failed infrastructure issues that you hear about across the country. failing schools, all the progressive policies that have led to the marginalizations of black communities across the country, that's essentially my district. That's the district that I've elected to run in. And when I first decided to do so, a lot of people they try to discourage me from doing that because they say it's a losing battle. The people don't want change. And I don't even understand where that comes from, Larry. Who even thinks that people don't want change? People want their community.
Well, they want the right kind of change, Demetrick, and that's why I personally endorse you and why people like Demetrick Pennie need to be in Congress, not the clowns that we see today. And so I urge people to support Demetrick Pennie. Where can they go to support you?
They can go to support me at Pennie for Congress, PENNIE, pennieforcongress.com. Pennieforcongress.com.
By the way,
learn more about me.
No, the doctor, you got a doctorate, okay? I mean, you're a bright guy, okay? So you're a thinking person, you're a philosopher, and hopefully you'll be an honest politician and warrior. Now, Joel, with regard to what you've been doing, you're working with me, and we're bringing cases. One of the defendants is Ben Crump, who wrote this book, White Genocide Against Colored People, extremely inflammatory book. HarperCollins has been sued. He's been sued. And apparently, from information we have, he's trying to represent nearly every defendant in the case so he can keep them quiet. And this is going to be quite a rocky road. The case was filed in Florida. Cases move in Florida. I'm from Florida. And give us your final thoughts on that. We have just simply a minute and a half as to what you think will be accomplished with that lawsuit.
Well, as you mentioned, Crump has this book called Open Season, Legalized Genocide of Colored People, and he's running around the country, these book tours, saying that we want black people to know that they're targets, and reading this crazy thing called the Black Pledge of Allegiance. It's a separatist black liberation theology that he's trying to use to make himself famous, make himself the next Al Sharpton. And I think your lawsuit has a great chance to really debunk and expose all of these themes that the left has and the media have been propagating to the detriment of the black Americans since 2012, since that shooting. Black Lives Matter was started because of this case. They have on their website, what are their goals? Transgenderism, globalism, and creating black villages. That's the goals of Black Lives Matter. It has nothing to do with black Americans. So the hoax that really started here, people don't realize that the Kavanaugh hoax, the fake whistleblower, all these lies that the media.
Well, the witch hunt against the president. Yeah.
Kind of the modern era of fake news, and now we know fake witnesses, race hoaxes. It all started here. So I think, Larry, you have it in your power, along with George Zimmerman, to really expose and debunk this and bring back the brotherhood that we had in America that was going on between black and white up until Barack Obama took the White House and instigated this division for his own political benefit.
Well, Joel, I want to thank you. We just have about 30 seconds left, but please, this is an extremely important show with Demetrick and Joel. I want you to share it. I want you to let your friends, patriots, others know about it. We need to tell truth to power. And please, God bless yourselves and your family. God bless America. God save America. I'll be back next week with another special edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. Thank you for listening.